We interrupt this program to bring you...
Hiroyuki Imaishi is a name well respected in the anime industry. Once a former employee at the now defunct studio Gainax to being one of the founders of Studio Trigger, Hiroyuki Imaishi has left behind a stellar legacy within his time in anime. With being attached to projects like Gurren Lagann, Dead Leaves, Evangelion, and so much more that we'll delve into, Imaishi has done extensive work within the field. For Imaishi's line of work, he'd take a much more different approach to anime, a less conventional way of animation and displaying a philosophy where the ultimate goal is to have fun and enjoy what you do regardless of what is going on around you. We've come to know Imaishi's work on popular shows like Panty&Stocking and Kill la Kill, but there's a lot behind the man that directed these works. You see, Imaishi wasn't just the average animator, he had a specific vision, a sense of style all to his own. I mentioned before, but he was unconventional to a T, a risk taker, a person that was the odd one out, but just odd enough to make things work. This is the story of Hiroyuki Imaishi, a trailblazer and an inspiration to always be weird and out there. Hiroyuki Imaishi would be born on October 4th, 1971 in Tokyo, Japan. Imaishi growing up was a massive fan of anime and manga, citing his inspiration coming from the theatrical release of Mobile Suit Gundam. He'd build the model kits while also being an avid watcher of the anime. At the time when Imaishi attended middle school, he'd end up drawing his own manga and he graduated from Tama Art University. At this point in time, fresh out of university, Imaishi would get his start as an animator. Imaishi would have some inspirations like any person in the entertainment field, and one of those people that inspired him would be Masahiro Yamashita. Now, quick side tangent about Yamashita, but Masahiro Yamashita was actually a very proficient and influential animator during the OVA boom of the 1980s and 1990s, where a ton of animes had OVAs, and OVAs during that time were the most popular way of dropping anime episodes that were either too violent or high in sexual content at the time for TV broadcasting. And with VCR purchases through the roof, this further reinforced how great an avenue it would be to release anime. Masahiro Yamashita worked on shows like Urusei Yatsura, Venus Wars, Megazone, and so many other animes. Alright, side tangent over. Imaishi, like any animator, has their own style of animating, but Imaishi's style was very unique. He's mainly known for his overly exaggerated facial features coupled with a very cartoony nature about the movements of said characters. Imaishi is very big on displaying perspectives being warped. Like for example, the scene in Kill la Kill where Gamagori takes his first step through the classroom, how much bigger his body is in comparison to the room and the people around him to display his level of authority. During the 90s, Imaishi was looking for a job in the animation field and then he came across an ad for Neon Genesis Evangelion. Imaishi having already been a fan of Studio Gainax's work, this would be his first work within the company. This also wouldn't be the last time Imaishi's name would be attached to a Hideaki Anno project. 1998 saw the release of Kare Kano, or in English known as His and Her Circumstances. Imaishi would actually begin to garner some attention towards his name. Imaishi storyboarded episodes 1, 3, 10, and 19 and did key animation on episodes 3, 10, and 19. Imaishi's presence was felt on Kare Kano seeing as it was a shoujo drama, Imaishi being able to add his stylistic flair to the show the only way he knew how to help propel himself as someone that should be taken very seriously as an animator. After his successful showing on Kare Kano, Imaishi was able to be a prominent director in Studio Gainax. Around this time, Gainax was going through a different age, a shift in its culture essentially, and with that came shows much more expressive in the kinds of stories they were willing to tell. One of the shows Imaishi would help work on would be Fooly Cooly, where he'd serve as an animation director for episodes 2 and 5. With Fooly Cooly bursting onto the scene in 2000, this was the shift I was talking about. A show this wild and eccentric in nature was a showcase for many young and up-and-coming animators, and Imaishi was definitely among that young bunch of upstarts. Imaishi's name would be attached to other products such as Travel Fist Planet, where he would do key animation episodes 2 and 3, and did the storyboard for episode 2. A fun fact about Travel Fist Planet, this was actually a prequel to the film Redline that was produced by Studio Madhouse and released in 2009. Shows like Abenodashi, Re-Cutie Honey, Metabots, and Yusi, Imaishi was pretty quickly establishing his name as a mainstay. Imaishi would also do work on the Parappa the Rapper anime where he did the storyboard for the first ending song. Then in 2002, he would help Hideaki Anno on the anime Tensho commercial. In 2004, Imaishi would have his solo directorial debut on the OVA titled Dead Leaves, but this is actually produced by Production IG. Dead Leaves would actually set the tone of what type of work Imaishi would continue to do later on in his career. Imaishi, like I said previously, had inspirations for his work, and the other would be Yoshinori Kaneda, which would be someone synonymous with this kind of approach Trigger and Gainax took with their shows. The overly exaggerated poses some characters would have in scenes that would actually be picked up by several animators, with Imaishi being included. The term was even coined Kaneda-style animation, whenever you see things that are similar to that brand of animation. The snappy character movements, his usage of timing with actions, this was all akin to Kaneda-style animation. At this point, Imaishi's running off of a ton of momentum. Being able to have his name attached to so many projects where people are able to pick up on his style of animation, the future looked promising for him, and it seemed like it could only go up from there. Imaishi worked on several animes that most people that have been around for in the anime space have known about. He did the storyboard for episode 9 of Samurai Champloo, provided key animation on the original Hellsing, but just for the opening, and helped on One Piece Baron Amatsuri and the Secret Island. But this is where things would drastically change. After this anime released, if a person didn't know Hiroyuki Imaishi's name, then they were sure to know the name very well with the release of Gurren Lagann in 2007. Another premiere anime for Studio Gainax. This would be Imaishi's first ever anime series where he would serve as a director for it, and the anime took off leaving nothing in its wake. To say Gurren Lagann was a hit for Gainax would be a massive understatement. The anime to this day is still held in very high regard with anime watchers, but we do have to look at how it even came to be. Even though Gainax had their ideas for Gurren Lagann, it wasn't exactly confirmed if Imaishi would serve as a director on the project or not, a fact that he would touch on in his interview with Crunchyroll back in 2019. Imaishi worked with numerous people in his earlier days at Gainax, and one of those men being Kazuki Nakashima, where they both worked on Evangelion. Imaishi would talk about getting Nakashima on for the project by saying, "It took some time before I was confirmed as director for Gurren Lagann, which slowed the call for Nakashima, but after I began as director, I immediately reached out to him." Imaishi stated that Nakashima and he were on the same wavelength when it comes to creating, and he figured who else better on this project than someone who best knows his thought process through and through. In entertainment, the workload is infinitely easier when you're able to collaborate with someone that shares the same vision as you, and this was one of those occasions with Imaishi and Nakashima, something that Imaishi would touch on further in the interview. Imaishi would go on to say, "I always found it strange too, why is he able to complete scripts this fast? During the first half of Gurren Lagann, we entrusted half of the work to different people as we were creating it, but starting in the latter half, we almost entirely relied upon Nakashima. When we did that, even though the number of staff members had decreased, it felt like the speed at which the scripts were completed had picked up, and yet the completed scripts were always entertaining every week. I thought this was really abnormal." The interviewer even made mention that there weren't that many revisions due to the strong team of Imaishi and Nakashima, and Imaishi would respond by saying, "If we entrust the script with multiple people, in the long run the script deviates in flavor from the story I've pictured, so then we have to do revisions. However, with Nakashima that wasn't the case, so it really made things easy for me." Gurren Lagann was very true to Imaishi. It had all of the staple attributes that we've come to know from his work. The grandiose scale, the raunchiness, the over-the-top humor. Imaishi and the team made sure that Gurren Lagann would be a product the world would pay attention to. Gainax at this time was being very receptive to the younger staff members and their takes on the animes they'd produce. Imaishi believed Gurren Lagann to be indicative of the generational shift going on at Gainax, even down to the portrayal of themes within Gurren Lagann. Before, Gainax focused on characters being introspective and more reserved, a la Evangelion, but Imaishi felt it was time to have a character with a loud personality take center fold and for it to have a certain energy that was missing from the shows the company would produce. Gurren Lagann wouldn't be the only thing to delve into having very boisterous protagonists either. 2010 saw the release of Panty&Stocking, another product directed by Hiroyuki Imaishi. Now I've spoken about Panty&Stocking in more depth in the previous video, but I'll spend a little bit of time going over it. Panty&Stocking was something that Imaishi and the staff had a blast working on. It was something that helped define Gainax in the 2000s into the 2010s, and while it wasn't as successful in Japan, it would become a cult classic for its uniqueness and style of comedy different from anime at the time. Imaishi had done everything he possibly could have at Gainax. After being employed by Gainax for well over a decade, it was time for a change to be made. Imaishi now having a ton of fan following, given all that he's done up until this point, he had his eyes set on a new beginning, a fresh start for someone of his talents.
Let's get scratching.
On August 22nd, 2011, 1 year after the release of Panty&Stocking, ex-Gainax members Hiroyuki Imaishi and Masahiko Otsuka would found the company known as Studio Trigger, a name synonymous with anime culture. This would be the home for everything Imaishi and Otsuka would ever dream of creating. In an interview with Anime News Network back in 2013, Masahiko Otsuka was asked what prompted him to create another studio when they were already working with Gainax, and Otsuka would respond by saying, "We came to the conclusion that if we wanted to do things surrounding our titles, such as communicating directly with fans in the way that we want, then we shouldn't rely on the studio. We concluded that we take responsibility for such things ourselves. Things were tough at first, and the most challenging part of this journey was money related. We still worry about money, but we also want to keep creating new things. That being said, I don't think we will have a single worry-free day going forward." Leaving something secure to branch off into something you're directly in charge of is a very scary thing to launch yourself into. Like any person in any business field, you're risking your livelihood for the sake of a chance of something working out. And Imaishi and Otsuka bet on themselves that they had what it took to make something even larger than themselves and be able to act on the philosophy they set out to achieve with Trigger. Imaishi and Otsuka mainly wanted to have fun with this venture. If they didn't have fun, then it would reflect on their work, and they can't have that. So any product they put forward, they had to enjoy working on it or else it wouldn't be made. Imaishi would go on to direct Kill la Kill, marking Studio Trigger's first ever animated series. Imaishi went into Kill la Kill with the hopes of it surpassing Gurren Lagann, and for this being Trigger's first series, they had very lofty goals to attain. Kill la Kill was something that amazed anime watchers at the time, an anime that feels like it could have been shown in the late 90s to early 2000s, the grandiose nature of the world, and a soundtrack made by the one and only Hiroyuki Sawano. It was a recipe for success, and it was. In an interview with Anime Hunch in 2024, Imaishi even touched on how Kill la Kill simply couldn't be made today. He explained by saying, "We couldn't make something like this anymore. I feel this way with every project, but it was particularly true this time. It was something we could only create back then. It wasn't meticulously calculated. Well, we were more calculated than we were during Gurren Lagann, but still, the studio back then didn't have the capacity to match what the product was trying to achieve. If the production capacity back then was a 10, we were ordering something like 20, but because of that, we were able to grow." What Imaishi says here is that certain things fell into place as to why Kill la Kill was made during the time that it was. There was a hunger that he and the rest of the team had for this anime. Coming straight out of Gainax, there was that pressure to perform and make a name for themselves within this already wildly competitive space. The environment that was created and the conditions surrounding them is why Kill la Kill was created. The Studio Trigger of now wouldn't have been able to make it, not because they don't have the talent, but due to them having that magic that it initially had going in. I have to stress how important it is, especially in a creative field, to know your limits. Not because you can't surpass them, but for the effect of knowing when to leave things alone. Imaishi has a philosophy of not really returning to do season 2s or continuations of shows because he feels that all that had to be said was in the product already. And due to him realizing that, they already made a statement with the show and that they don't need to retread that ground. With Trigger's work across the years, every single one of them has that same feeling and energy of being made by Trigger but having a set style and tone to them. Kill la Kill, SSS Gridman, BNA, Pro Mare, Cyberpunk Edgerunners, Little Witch Academia. All these shows have the Trigger essence but are all so different in a way that's unique to their shows, which ties back to Imaishi's beliefs about the studio itself, to keep doing things that haven't been done before. For all the talk of Studio Trigger, we have to delve back into Imaishi's animation style, which is something that has helped bolster Trigger to the success that it has. I made mention of Imaishi essentially being a student of the Kaneda style animation, and he takes us to the umpteenth degree in the animes he's been able to produce. Imaishi makes sure that at any point when you watch these shows, there's something happening visually that will keep your attention. Imaishi said that he himself gets bored very easily, so something has to be interesting to want him to keep going. So whenever you watch a Trigger work, it's so visually appealing that you can't be bored while watching it. It's also in part for why a lot of their work is overflowing and high energy. They want you to feel something, anything, any emotion you can feel, these shows want to bring it out of you. The main reason why Imaishi and Otsuka were able to find success in Studio Trigger is also in part to their heavy involvement with the fan base. Imaishi and Otsuka are fans of the medium, and what better way to incorporate the people that also share that same love and passion for their work than the fans. After all, the fans believed in them so much they absolutely shattered their stretch goal for the production of Little Witch Academia in record time. The success of this studio is something to admire. It is very easy to fail in these types of settings, but with the team that Imaishi and Otsuka were able to assemble, they were able to weather the storm. It's important to note as well that Trigger has only been around for almost 14 years at this point. They haven't been around for that long a time, but their impact will still be felt for many more years to come. What's really telling about the shows that Imaishi handles is that for all the flashiness the shows tend to have, there's always something to be taken away from them, a lesson to be told, but it's just served to you in a very unconventional way, the Trigger way. There's a reason why he's as special as he is. It's no surprise to see that Hiroyuki Imaishi's work has a very strong base in the West. That retro nostalgia feel checks a ton of boxes for a lot of anime watchers. There's a comfortability when watching these shows because it brings you back to a simpler time. Anime itself is a beautiful medium for expression, and Imaishi always felt that was an extremely important part in bringing a production together. The products they work on have to have that Trigger touch or it wasn't going to happen. To be able to transform a work, whether it be an original title or an adaptation, it all has to feel that way no matter where it came from. It feels like a Studio Trigger project. Imaishi has always been at the forefront for youth in his storytelling and for new faces to be able to tell said stories. In an interview with Forbes back in 2018, Imaishi would speak on Studio Trigger itself and its foundation. He'd state that the industry itself will really struggle if new people won't come in. Of course, with Trigger, I expected a degree of circulation of people, so people coming and going. I don't think I established a studio because there was an influx of new people though. Basically, I wanted to establish this company with the mind that the studio would continue to make original animation, and also I don't have to be the sole director. That means other people can direct. For those people, I also think the company realizes that. It's the fact that with Imaishi's goal and vision, Studio Trigger is able to be as fresh as they can be, to have just about anyone take their shot in the directorial seat. Delicious in Dungeons anime adaptation was done by Yoshihiro Miyajima, and that was his first solo directorial debut. The team behind Trigger always has trust in whoever they choose to man the helm. There's a coziness to their work, a familiarity to the animes that I made mention of before, which is in part why Trigger's work is as big as it is in the West. With something so rich in personality, it's absolutely difficult to not take it into greater consideration. The rough edge that the shows tend to have makes it feel like you drew this together when you were younger to tie it back to that familiarity. Imaishi's work feels like the people's work, the fans' work, and with them incorporating fan interaction as much as they do within their work, it feels like you're working alongside the greats and producing something that you can all enjoy together. That is the community that Imaishi and the team at Trigger uphold. Hiroyuki Imaishi is a living legend. A person with such a brilliant mind was able to amass this amount of success over the years, and he will continue to do so with the environment he was able to help cultivate. The accolades, the fanfare, the personal satisfaction. Everything was able to be achieved this way due to his efforts, to standing firm on beliefs, to always be the odd one out, to always challenge yourself, to always be open to change and expression. This is why Hiroyuki Imaishi is the heart and soul of Studio Trigger. Anytime I can speak on Trigger, it's always a fun time. I wanted this to be the first part of a new series I do on the channel, doing deep dives on animators that help bring out our favorite shows, and I wanted to start with Imaishi, just like how I started doing the anime studio deep dives with Studio Trigger. I have ideas on who the next one will be about, but you guys can let me know in the comments which animator you'd like to see this type of video done for. There's a million of them to choose from, and I think it'd be really fun to learn the madness behind these great artists, but I'm gonna get out of here. I'll be seeing you all next time.